But they don't call it collage yet. Is that very interesting?
They both said, they said, oh, gosh, that's not right. And I said, and they said, oh no, it's not.
Oh, it's good. It's good. I think it was just good.
Told me 6:30. It's going to blast out to everybody. Actually, I just sent it to people.
Computers are a part of my life.
Yeah, you probably don't. No, I don't know yet. Still, there's only like 7 of us. You're all customers. His name is Sebastian. Close enough. You guys all
So I think we're good. I'm assuming the live stream will be started or start soon. Thank you. This thing works. And, yeah, Rob seems to be bored of it.
Let's see, you've got all of these.
All right, everyone, if you want to grab a seat, there's still several up here near the front. We're about to get started. Please don't hesitate to grab one of these front row seats, unless you want to stay. All right, welcome to Product Austin, everyone. Thank you for coming. Who's here for their first Product Austin meetup? All right, that is great. Well, we think this is about our 16th one. Usually here at the Capital Factory. I think we've been at a couple other locations, but appreciate everybody coming. We've tried to put this meetup together to really bring some great speakers from outside of the Austin area that have a lot of product insights, a lot of founder insights, and a lot of just great information to share. And we have a great presenter, great topic for tonight's presentation on building invisible products. Our speaker is Dennis Mortensen, who is not only the author of Data-Driven Insights, but also the co-founder and CEO of x.ai. So we're going to let Dennis talk for a little bit. We're going to have a little time for questions at the end. And then you can stay around afterwards if you want to talk to him or have a little more chance to mingle and talk among your fellow product managers and other product people here in Austin. And that's about it for agenda for the night. So sponsor. We are sponsored. All the pizza and all the goodies are sponsored by productacademy.org. So please check that out. Share it if you have anyone that's looking for some product management training. Would really appreciate that. Prabhakar. I'm Josh Duncan, by the way, and this is Roger Colvin. Our third meetup organizer. Prabhakar is not here this evening, but he is the one that paid for the pizza. So please check out productacademy.org. Appreciate that. So with further ado, I'm going to get your slides up and I'm going to turn it over to Dennis. So please welcome Dennis.
Just a quick note, you can follow along on Twitter and live tweet if you like, Product Austin hashtag or at Product Austin at mention.
Did you write that down? You're gonna fucking go tweet that right now. So, I am certainly from far away. We are doing this venture out of New York, where I spent the last 8 years, spent actually 4 years in Budapest before that, and spent some time in England prior to that, and actually spent some time in Trinidad and Tobago, of all places, before that. And that's a funny story, because that's what you're supposed to do. I was so fortunate that my very first venture had an exit on April 2000, so I was one of the guys that got out on the right side of the dot-com bubble. And the first thing you're supposed to do is go to the islands. I fucking hated it. I hated it. It just wasn't fun at all. I thought I could stay there forever, but I was like 26, so obviously didn't stay there for long. What I want to do tonight is provide, if not insight, then certainly commentary to how we thought about building a product, which is not an app or a web service or a plugin or an extension or something for where there's a wireframe you put in place first and a whole process that we've all got accustomed to over the last many decades for how you're supposed to kind of develop software, but something that really only exists in dialogue. And the things I want to talk about is certainly just initially this idea that I think there's a potential change in the software paradigm. I certainly believe in it so much that we've been working on this for the last 3 years. And two, who are the companies that play in this new paradigm, and how should you choose to kind of look at this new paradigm, and a very short example of certainly what we do as a backdrop, and then some input on things that we think about when designing an intelligent agent like Amy. And then in the very end, you can either say, that was fantastic, or call bullshit, and then we can fight it out over the next kind of 20 minutes. Sounds fine? Yeah. Cool. So this first part, which I certainly believe in strongly, is that we've all, perhaps even more so than most in here, because I sadly turned 44 a few days ago, have seen software over the last 2+ decades, and really, if you think about it, almost for the last half century, do one thing, which is assist you in doing a job a little bit faster, a little bit more accurate than you would otherwise be able to do it. And that means if you want to go set up a new financial model for your startup for the year 2017, you'll boot up Excel, you'll inject the numbers you believe you need, and you'll sit and work on that for hours or days or weeks even. But you are the one doing the job. You will be the one taking the credit for having done that financial model. And I think that is really something that is true for most software. So if you need a new button or a new image or whatever it might be, you'll boot up Photoshop, you'll inject whatever kind of imagery that you need to kind of do that, and you'll be working it, and come the end of that, you did it, and you can take the credit. And that's really how software works today. And I think even with all the progress that we've seen for where, certainly when I took my CS degree, for where everything was command line and all the way up to now, it hasn't really changed the paradigm. Things are faster, easier, nicer, and certainly quicker to adopt and so on and so forth. But I think the paradigm stayed true. And I think this new paradigm is one for where, no, I do not want to be assisted. No, I do not want to do it faster. I don't want to do it at all. I want you to do it. So I think this new paradigm is one for where I'll describe to my software what I want done, then you do it. And I think there's plenty of things for where the only value I really add is some initial hypothesis or some initial idea or some initial constraints for what I want done, and the rest is just a chore. Sometimes a 2-minute chore, sometimes a week, month-long chore that you just have to do, but you didn't add any value along the way. So if you go set up that financial model, you have 15 items that you want to make sure stays true, and the rest is really just you fiddling around in Excel for hours at end. That will change. And that change is one for where you describe this objective, and the job is now done by this agent. We can call it AI, intelligent agents, what have you, but certainly this agent would do it for you. And it's not that we haven't seen that paradigm. That paradigm really have existed for the last many centuries, and it just happened to be that it used to be humans on the other side and go no longer than your travel agent that 20 years ago you would ask them, hey, could you be so kind and figure out whether I can go to Miami for the weekend with my wife and 2 daughters for less than $1,000, and I need to be back at 10 a.m. on Monday. That's an agent. It's just that that agent was extremely expensive. But I think we will be falling back into that. And I think this is the moment. These first agents that you'll see will be super simple. But I think that is the beginning or the catalyst to this very dramatic shift in how we think about software. And it used to be, right, that if I wanted something done for where you need to go find that flight to Miami, that I would think about what data do I have? How do I visualize that? In what framework is it being exposed to the user? And how can he kind of navigate it? And what are the results and the actions he should take? And we've done that 1,000 times over. But that's actually not what I want as a user. What I want is to go to bloody Miami. That's all I wanted. I don't want to sit 2 hours in Expedia and try to play the travel agent. I'm not even a good travel agent. So that, I think, is an important paradigm to either agree with or disagree with. Because if you agree with it, then there's many of the applications that we see today that will have to disappear. We can then kind of discuss the horizon for whether that is happening over the next year or half decade or more. But if it is about to happen, then Expedia, if we use that as a backdrop, cannot exist as we know it. That's have been the backdrop certainly for what we've done here. I think many of those that jumped into this space right now, if you think about it, when you see announcements from the Facebooks or the Googles or the Amazons and the so on and so forth, I think they play perhaps in 3 different segments. And I think all of us in here will probably also play within those 3 segments, and I think we need to attack it differently depending on what segment that we want to play in. And I'm not even sure perhaps that the word segmentation is right here, but certainly groupings on where you want to participate. And I think the very top level of this is this idea of what I call an AI platform, and don't fall in love with the monikers here, but this idea that you can go do things on Skype or Facebook Messenger or Slack for where there's a framework provided for which you cannot go outside of that framework, but you get free distribution. Almost like when Facebook started and you can do social games on that platform. And this is going to be the same with agents. They're obviously extremely limited because you can only do what they allow you to do. Then I think, and that's interesting, I would certainly, as an entrepreneur, be extremely worried, should I build a company on top of somebody else's platform, because then I'm at the mercy of whatever they think is right. And we all have some sort of memory of the 40 companies that tried to build on top of Twitter until they changed their mind, which that was not a good setting. if you have some sort of recollection of that. There's a lot of adult people crying. The next, I think, segment is this AI as a service. So go no further than sign up for Microsoft Azure or Amazon or Google's cloud services, and you can get proper prediction APIs or machine learning APIs that you can access and really just inject data in, and out comes a prediction. But you're certainly, again, at the mercy of the quality of the models which they put in place, and there's a cost to every prediction which you do, should you go develop some application. But that provides you certainly the freedom to do whatever you want on whatever channel, but getting a head start using some of their APIs. But it's a service. And then I think there's this idea of AI software, for where you believe so much in the future I just described before, that you feel the urge to go engineer proprietary software from the ground up. Something for where you can cater so much to the data which you collected and the models you put in place to massage that data, that you can do whatever you want at whatever level of accuracy. And obviously the first one here is the cheapest. You and me tonight go jump in and hack something together on Facebook Messenger, and it will be what it will be, and perhaps we can order a pizza, and that will be that. And I think the AI as a service, the Google Prediction API have been around for years, right? You can do good, proper things with their APIs, and obviously the most expensive is the bottom one, for where you have to almost develop everything yourself, but you have complete freedom. We picked the last one, and I think in any setting for where your agent need extremely high accuracy, it could be potentially dangerous to lean up against other people's either channels or APIs, for where there could be some sort of ceiling for what you can extract from those. And just like, as I'm sure you can imagine, so we've all followed this idea of us seeing a self-driving car in the not too distant future. And we've kind of solved it, right, as an industry. And if Google kind of launched it tomorrow, as in, ta-da, we solved it, we're here. Footnote, for every 10,000 miles, we'll kill a pedestrian. That footnote, that is probably going to kill the product, right? As in, it's pretty amazing if you can drive around Manhattan for 10,000 miles without any assistance and only kill one pedestrian. I would actually be kind of technically amazed, as in, good job. On Jenny, not so good. But technically, a fantastic job. And I'm not saying what we do here, because we're in the business of setting up meetings. So we're not in the business of running around with cars on the road, but we're still in a vertical for where there's a expectation of very high accuracy. As in, if you and I agree to meet on 25 Broadway, for where we have our offices in Manhattan, when you arrive in September, you assume I will be there. And if I'm not, there's a level of disappointment for where, hey, I kind of booked a trip, traveled here to have this discussion, and he's not here. Not cool. And those would be the polite words. Just not fucking cool. And here, I think there'll be some products for where you'll be forced into that high level of accuracy. Others, you don't really need high level of accuracy, right? Go no further than looking at a system that tries to figure out whether your friend is in that picture that you uploaded to Facebook. If that runs at 80% accuracy, that's kind of okay, right? It's like 3 boxes, but there's 4 people. I'll just click the 4th person myself. It's my mom. I can see why they can't, predict that. Cool. And I'll do that myself, and you're okay. But there's some product where that just doesn't work. I think, though, that the way it's going to play out, and you can disagree or agree here, I think there's certainly some past that suggests that this will be the case. It's one for where you'll see a set of very limited horizontal AIs and a pool of what I describe as vertical AIs. And the way I think about these horizontal AIs is this idea that, actually the way I think about agents in general, is that the future will not be one for where you have 120 apps on your phone and then you blink and 2 years passed and now you have 240 apps on your phone. That's That's not a version of the future I want to live in. So I think that future will be one where you employ a host of agents to do jobs that you don't want to do. But I think you will not somehow memorize that you have 22 agents employed to do some of these jobs. I think you'll have an intimate relationship with a primary agent, such as Siri, Cortana, Alexa, Watson, whatever that might be in that horizontal set of AIs. And they will become a set of enablers that will be aware of what vertical AIs do we have on our payroll here, and which ones do I need to reach out to kind of solve the job that was just described. Such as me asking Siri, hey Siri, could you set up a meeting between John and I first week of September when he's in Manhattan for an hour at the office? And as I say that, Siri needs to either figure out that that is something which she cannot do, but I do see that we have somebody on payroll who can do that. And I think the very first version of this you've seen already. If some of you in here have the Amazon Echo, you can kind of see how they played that out. It's a little bit clunky, right? Because you have to kind of say, hey Alexa, can you play Eye of the Tiger from Spotify? And you can see how I wake her up, give her the command, connect her to the agent, and it's a little bit not like I had hoped the future will play out, but I think this is just the very beginning. But I think it's true what they're envisioning though, which is that they'll be the enabler and they want all these verticalized AIs to participate. And again, I think we're at the very beginning here, but I actually don't think that it's realistic to assume that some sort of oracle will arrive some morning, a press release from Google saying, again, ta-da, we've solved it. Here's whoever, ask it anything, it'll have an answer. Task it to do a job, and it'll do that job. It's almost kind of like, if you think about it, really suggesting that there should be no app store on your phone. Hell, they have almost unlimited capital, so why do they even have an app store? They should just engineer all the apps themselves. But that seems like crazy talk, right? As in, even with almost unlimited capital, you can't do 2 million apps. Even if you could do that, as in there will be some sort of connect between cash on hand and the cost to go engineer these, you wouldn't even know what to engineer. So what apps would you need to engineer for a 44-year-old entrepreneur in Manhattan from Denmark with 2 teenage daughters? As in, they wouldn't even have the imagination to know what apps I need on my phone. I think it's going to be the exact same thing with these agents, for where that idea of one agent to rule them all, but they wouldn't even know what I want from that agent, what jobs I need done. And there'll be a set of very specific, unique jobs where only a sub-segment would want that, and they just wouldn't get to it. So that's certainly how I see this being split and almost kind of replicated, and whether it becomes some sort of intelligent agent marketplace, we'll see. Let me just quickly describe how we've attacked our agent. So we set out to create this intelligent agent that can set up meetings, no more, no less. So the usual setting, right, for where an email arrives in your inbox, just like this one here. Hey Michael, good to talk to you yesterday. Do you have time to meet up later today, tomorrow, or perhaps early next week? I'm free most days after 1 p.m. This is a real email. That's not a fucking email, that's a riddle. As in, what do you want me to do here? Like, perhaps early next week, most days after 1. Like, I gotta look at that later. As in, I'm not meeting up with my friend here. But really, this happens over and over again. As in, I actually did the sad thing of counting the amount of meetings which I did prior to us starting this venture. I did 1,019 meetings in the year 2012. 1,019. Did it all myself, like we all do. Because the human personal assistant is just too costly, or you're too frugal, too entrepreneurial, too stupid to go hire one. So you don't. So I did it myself, at home, alone, in my underwear, with a bowl of cereal, at 10 p.m. every day. What was even sadder, I had 672 reschedules on those meetings. As in, I actually fought to have these meetings set up, and then John emails me, hey, I can't make it. Fuck you, John. We spent all this time setting up the meeting, and now we're not doing it? Not cool. So the way you want to solve that is not, again, I think, something for where, let me go engineer a wonderful website or web service of sorts, or app or extension or plugin or doodle me or tongue me or whatever. As in, that's not what I want. I certainly don't want to look at this email thinking, yeah, we could meet up. I think my next step now is to go find my scheduling app, double click, because multitasking is really great on your phone. That's irony. So that's, multitasking is shit on your phone. Double click, flip, flip, flip. I think it's the pink one. Open, great. Oh, I gotta pick 3 times. Click, click. Didn't I promise something? I don't know. Click. Ah, fuck, I need his email. Double click back, copy paste, which is even worse. Okay, copy. There we go, and back. That's not what I want. What I want is that split second where I decide either I want to meet up with John or not. And if I do, I want to hand it over. It's a chore which I don't want to do. I just want to meet up. So in that setting, I CC in our agent, and our agent lives on email as a channel, but I'm not saying that email is the channel, it's just a channel, and the reason that we picked this channel is that the vast majority of the meeting requests which you receive arrive in your inbox. You might have a few set of intimate requests that comes through text, perhaps some comes through Facebook, but the vast majority, certainly at this moment in time, arrives on email. We try to kind of create this positive disconnect between intelligence and channel so that should that change, we can exist on another channel. And as you kind of CC in the agent, what you describe here is the job which is, hey John, I'd be happy to meet up next week, which is the whole, no, not later today. That's ridiculous. I'm not meeting up with you later today. So I'll meet up with you next week. Please work with Amy, CC, to get this on the calendar. As I click send, her job now is to immediately remove me from the conversation, reach out to the single or multiple participants, have a very human-like, not even conversations, but really negotiations on when we can meet, where we should meet, conflicts, take my preferences into consideration, as in, what do I really want, which she needs to know to kind of serve me well. And sometimes what's even funnier is that, and you've all done this, and don't lie to me, which is that you end up being overly kind in your email. Like, I'm obviously not from around here. So I'm Danish, and there's like 11 Danish people in the world. So whenever somebody arrives in New York, they email me as in, hey, we should meet up for a cup of coffee. Yeah, we should. As in, we really shouldn't. But here we are. But I just can't get myself to do the whole we really shouldn't, queen and country and all that good stuff. So I said, yeah, you know what? Let's get Amy on the case. Then I click send. Then I immediately email Amy and say, hey, Amy, Fridays only, my office, 20 minutes. As in, I don't want to say that to his face, but I want her to understand that those are the constraints, and if it doesn't happen, it wasn't to be. If it does happen, then it is within this limited kind of room that I'm willing to donate to this cause. So that's our agent, and I think it plays very well with this idea that it's a change of paradigm where you will not set up the meeting. It'll be kind of magical to you, which is that you hand it over, you describe the objective, and it can be hours, days, weeks, depending on what is being negotiated here before she comes back to you. And that's really a change, right? Even a change from when you think about even Siri right now. And I'm not saying that we are smarter, we're just verticalized. As in, pick up your iPhone right now and say, hey Siri, could you be so kind and set up a meeting between Dennis, Michael, John, and I, first week of December when we arrive in Manhattan? What? As in, she'll have no idea. I'll bet you $100 from my wallet right now that you're going to get 10 web results, which is a really kind of poor surrender mechanism, but that's a different story. So that's the verticalization of the agent, and I really, really believe in that. As in, so much I've invested 3 years of my life to try and kind of act it out. I do want to add a couple of comments here, at least just as a backdrop for any questions that you might have. That right now, 2016, not much is given for free, so it's certainly not for the faint of heart to do any one of these agents. So we're 70 guys, 3 years to do this, and we're not in market. Soon we will be in market, but it's just hard. But I think most people somehow aren't completely clear about the hard part. So you and I agree with some of our hedge fund friends to build a tunnel from Manhattan to New Jersey. And most people will talk about the tunnel and all the good things about it, but that's not really the work. The work is the drill. You should be talking about what drill do we need to assemble to get from here to there. If you think about one of these agents, the agent and her skills, no, that's not the job. What data do you need to collect? How do you need to annotate that? Forget even what models you want to put in place to try to make predictions on top of the data which you just collected. The vast majority of the work here is figuring out what data to collect and how to annotate it. And I can see half of you don't believe me. We'll call bullshit afterwards and then we'll talk about it. As in, we spent an unfair amount of time in engineering a custom-built data annotation console for our specific vertical. We've spent millions of dollars in just annotating data over and over again. And once annotated, we spent even more time trying to kind of define in what universe this data kind of exists. And that have been new, different, and not something that resembles any other type of product development. And I think anybody who seeks $10 to go do any venture on any agent would need to have certainly some model that suggests how much they're going to invest in collecting this data and having it annotated. This is a grand title. You know, what makes a good AI product? That's not for me to decide here. I do certainly believe that it needs to be truly autonomous, as in you give it you describe this objective and it will do that job in full. It's not a shared task. I do believe, really, and I've said it like 5 times, perhaps I'm just talking to myself and this is therapy, but somehow I really believe that we need to move away from the I assist you into this new paradigm of I do the job for you. I also believe that the conversational UI is probably the best UI to go provide these agents, but they're not the same. And I think certainly if you look at the press, you'll see these two things being kind of clubbed together, but they're two different things. There's a concept called the intelligent agent that will have the ability to do a job for you, and then there's the conversational UI for where I need no button, no visual interface, no GUI. I need to be able to just describe what I want to do, but you can even do that in the non-agent worlds. It's just that there's a heavy overlap here, but they're not the same. And then perhaps in the end here, and in the most simple description of what we've done, and I think what many people will kind of do that try to kind of go engineer some of these agents, if you really think about it, it's one part text extraction challenge, as in you set something in an email which I need to extract and understand. And then it's a text generation challenge, as in, now that I understand what you just told me to do, then I write this back to you. I think most, certainly, engineering teams will invest 99% of their time, effort, and energy into the text extraction. You know, that's a real engineering challenge, right? As in, you need to figure out what intents do I need to pick up from this, how good am I at predicting that, which entities do we need to identify and extract, and all of that good stuff that comes with trying to figure out, you said, Wednesday at 2 o'clock. But on the other side of that, and that is perhaps, I think, where there'll be a whole new set of jobs coming out of this, which is that for an app, we have a very good understanding of the information architect or the UI person or the user experience person and what they're supposed to do and what they contribute with. But in a product where there is no pixels, there's only words, who do you hire to do that? What is that function? Who writes this text if it comes out as text, and is it full-on templates? Are there paragraphs, sentences, variables? What does that even look like? And I think the last thing you should do is just to say, as long as it's directionally correct, any engineer who writes any function can write the output as well. Then you just get a bag of templates. Might as well just call up a Verizon and record that and use that in your product. As in, that can't be it. It needs to be something else. So we ended up inventing, and time will tell whether that was a good call, but inventing this position that we call an AI interaction designer. Somebody who owns the persona. Somebody who have an idea of, so this agent who operates in this universe under this type of persona should communicate in this way when this happens. And it needs to be in such a way that if you speak to Amy on Monday and you speak to her again on Friday, it feels like the same agent. Not as in everything she said is certainly correct, but it seems like just 2 emails are received from 2 random people. That can't be it. So we've heavily invested into this idea of the text generation part. And I'll just give you a good example here. So the one that we ended up hiring initially as the first person for this job is not as a negative, as in she's a drama major who have spent her time and energy in initially through education and afterwards creating characters on stage. Something where if we go to the Met on Friday, I'm not going to sit there and check whether Othello is aligned to the syntax, as in he said everything he was supposed to say. Now I'm going to see that play and come to the end of it, have some sort of connection with that character. And we need the same. And I think if I leave you with one insight, that is certainly one for where don't underinvest in this one part of any AI product you might or might not touch in the future. I think it's extremely important. And if you want to see something funny or really interesting is a better word, go to x.ai/love notes, and not only will you see thousands of people who are happy, but you'll see 2 things which I'm super happy about. I thought it would take longer. But one, certainly, they describe this as a job, as in they have this employer-employee relationship. That's how they think about it. Just do what I tell you to do, or great job, thank you very much, and all of that good stuff. But also immediately went to describing it as him or her. Not as in it, app, software, service. No, him, her. What's even funnier is that when they make fun of their friends for not having figured out that they talked to a machine for 4 days to set up a meeting, they'll say, hey, my friend Alan didn't even know that she was a machine. Hey, dude, you just said she. Who are you making fun of, you or him? Now I'm confused. And that just arrived almost immediately. And I think without having any immediate data to kind of back it up, that we can contribute some of that success to the large investments in the text generation part. Cool. That's me. Does that make sense? Cool. Let me give you the summary here, and then you can run out or really challenge me. One, I do believe, again, that you have to either be in agreement with or strongly in disagreement with that there's a paradigm shift in how software is being delivered. It is no more about assisting you, it's about doing jobs in full. 2, most of those jobs will be done by intelligent agents, and I think that intelligent agent market will be divided at least into 2, what we describe as horizontal AIs and vertical AIs. I think all the horizontal AIs will be owned by the platform owners, the Apples and the Microsofts, and we're left with all the vertical AIs. I think that's a fantastic space to be in. 3, if you do any endeavor, it is not all about, but for all intents and purposes, it is about the data which you can collect and how well you can annotate it. 4, there is no wireframe to what you do here. There is no 2 pixels. There is some new text output where you need to figure out how much you want to invest into that process. I suggest you over-invest. And we came up with the AI interaction designer role, and we'll see how that fares over time. But we can certainly see that it worked for us to the extent where people buy into the idea that there's something here which is a machine, but it's implemented so well that I still want to call it she. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dennis. Do you have a little bit of time for questions?
I'm staying overnight. Go wild.
All right, looks like we have a few questions here in the audience already. Really enjoyed your presentation.
Thank you.
So I actually have 3 questions, if that's okay. You talked about the data annotation. Could you describe that a little bit? And then
Yeah.
how is that then used?
So I think perhaps the very first task for any one of these agents is to come up with some conceptual model of the universe which you exist in. And that sounds super grand, like you want to punch me in the face for just saying it. But I really believe it. So if you create a self-driving car, you can obviously not create a model of the real world, as in way too complex. So you create some sort of simplistic model of that world, roads, pedestrians, vehicles, bicycles, so on and so forth. But whatever universe you exist in, you need to be able to define that. Because if you can't define it, then you're trying to engineer the oracle. So you need to know exactly what is inside this universe, what is outside of it. And that have taken, even for us, hell, we schedule meetings and you will tell me immediately, Dennis, let me just define that for you. 1, date, time, participants, location. Do you want more? Because I think I pretty much nailed it for you. I wish it was that simple. We probably spent 14 months or more on just the initial model of time. Like, either we are retarded or it's complex. And I wish that it was simple. And in that definition, it's something where, how does time exist in our universe here? So it'll be great if everybody just said 1900 hours, 40 minutes, EST, daylight saving, August 9th. How about that? But that's not how people talk.
Tomorrow.
Exactly. Yeah. Tomorrow, but even worse, later. What? This afternoon. Or even worse, you say something which is not true, which is you say tomorrow when you mean today. We all do that, right? So tonight at 1 a.m. when you postpone that meeting, you still use the word tomorrow. It's technically today, right? Or the worst of the worst, let's meet up on my return. Where you at? When are you coming back? But you're still trying to convey time to the agent, right? So that is certainly the very first real task, define that universe. And you can think about it in multiple ways. So for us, it's really a set of intents, as in, what can exist here? New meeting, cancel meeting, reschedule, add participant, change location, all those things that can exist in a meeting scheduling universe. But that was the first one. Once you have that defined, then comes the second one. Where is that data going to come from? Where are you going to collect it? And once collected, how do you want to annotate it? So let's go back to time. Somebody writes, let's meet up Wednesday-Friday. Obviously, that suggests that we can also meet Thursday. So what do you mark? Do you mark Wednesday and Friday as that meaning Wednesday and Friday, and dash as Thursday? That's obviously not good. Do you mark the whole thing as a range? So you need to kind of figure out, how do I mark that? And that actually becomes a very expensive exercise, as in that will cost you, right? As in you hire people to kind of label this data, they're part of your team. Then you label it with something in mind. You want to build some model for where I need the data labeled in this way, and then we can create a model to kind of predict that in the future. But then you figure out later that, oh, that's not what I wanted. Let's say you spent 5 months collecting your temporal data with that in mind. What do you do now? Do you empty that bucket, as in, that was the last 5 months, because it was not really what we needed? Or do you re-annotate, which is probably going to be equally expensive to just annotate over again? Which brings me back to the whole, you need to define that universe up front, because there's going to be a lot of data you're going to throw away. And that set of annotation guidelines, I'll give you just an example here, and I'm not proud, it's just a sad fact. It's short of 100 pages long on how to annotate 3 entities for us. 30 pages almost alone just on time. As in, even I would do a poor job, as in if I just jumped in and tried to kind of label dates and times, I couldn't do it because we are extremely anal about how we label that.
So is the annotation like a
Microphone. So is the annotation like a kind of a rule, or to translate like tomorrow? What does tomorrow mean? Is that what that?
So the annotation is just the raw labeling. Then there's the kind of resolve that into something, which is a challenge that comes afterwards. So Wednesday is not, which is even sadder, right? Wednesday is not even a time. That is something which we might be able to suggest could be a time, right? Is it Wednesday today? Is this Wednesday? Tuesday, okay. So if I say Wednesday, it's very likely I talk about tomorrow, right? But I didn't say tomorrow.
But if you say Tuesday, you probably don't mean today.
Exactly.
Unless it's much later, or, yeah.
And, so that means when I label that Tuesday, there's probably something in front of Tuesday which I also need to label. Because otherwise, how can I differ between one Tuesday over another? When you say this Tuesday or next Tuesday, or later today Tuesday. Sorry?
Any Tuesday.
Yeah, or any Tuesday, right? Now, how does that kind of fit into your annotation model? So when I talk about annotation, that is just raw labeling. Then comes the whole challenge afterwards. What's even harder is once you label it, once you can resolve it into something, you also need to kind of be able to co-reference it, right? So we all do this. Let's meet up Wednesday at 2 o'clock. And you say all sorts of shit. Then you say, oh, we can do 3. Do 3? That 3, what does that belong to? That must belong to something, right? Then you need an annotation guideline where that 3 I need to mark probably together with something you said 2 sentences, or perhaps even a paragraph before, or even worse, 2 emails ago, like 3 days ago, where I can't make 3, can we do 5? You're talking about something where you assume I know what 3 we're talking about, and it needs to be a little bit later. That just makes it extremely complex. So that labeling is just that first very initial labeling task. Sorry, this is just because I'm talking to myself now. Next question.
I asked because I was interested.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's fine. Other questions?
So all the interactions you're talking about so far are human to agent, and you would think that in that case there's always going to be a convergence to a solution. But what happens when both sides have an agent and they have different companies, so they have different standards, and maybe they diverge, they never get to a solution?
Two things. One, when 2 Amy's meet each other, so you and me meet up, 2nd week of September, you email me saying, Dennis, can we meet up for a cup of coffee? I reply back saying, yeah, I'm up for a cup of coffee. I have CC'd in Amy at x.ai. She can help put something on my calendar. You reply back and say, as you suggest, oh, wonderful. I've CC'd in Andrew. He can hash it out with Amy. What if Andrew is Amy? Who the hell is she talking to? She's talking to herself. And we talk about that around the office because we geeks as scheduling nirvana. As in, then we go from this asynchronous back and forth between man and machine that on average takes about 2 days, mostly because we wait for humans to get back to us, to this near instant setting, right? Where you can start to say things such as, hey, Amy, can you get me and the product design team together early next week, not Tuesday? As you click send, she talked to 7 people already, and you're meeting Wednesday, 10 a.m., meeting room 9F. That's fucking sexy. Huh? That's exactly what you want. But that also suggests that it's probably a winner-takes-all market. As in, whoever gets there first have the advantage of creating things that you can't even do if you're a competing agent. Then we can talk about, so what happens in this setting where there's multiple ventures that are on the verge of solving it at the same time, and we have competing agents. That is probably going to have us end up replicating human negotiation tactics, for where one of the strongest things you can do is wait. As in, if I learn that your agent surrenders after me saying no, 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 I just keep saying no because I know after 7 no's you surrender. Great. It's machines. It's only going to take 10 seconds for you to surrender to a meeting out of my office. Great. So do that with that agent all the time. They should be smart enough to figure that out, and that means we are now competing. Then who dares to hold out the longest? And what is my model of whether I think you are more important than me or vice versa? Where do I want the meeting more than you want the meeting? And that just creates a very complex setting for where we're back to almost where we started. Just that we don't have pain, but there won't be instant. So I really try to race towards this inflection point where we solve it and we create a one agent market, at least for this particular pain point. It's a very good observation.
Other questions for Dennis? Let's see, let me just make sure there's nobody in the back row that wants to go.
My question is again related to data annotation. You were saying that data labeling was one of the major challenges. Was hardware speed also a challenge, that you would have wanted it to be faster and the processing was a thing that was holding you?
In what capacity?
As in the speed of training the network.
Not really. We've certainly gone from, being brutally honest, if I look back at some of the very first tries, it would take us about 3 weeks to retrain a certain model. So by the way, given again we're attacking a distinct vertical, which is tractable, we can create unique models for each one of the problems which we have. So not one overarching model for the whole system, but that would take almost 3 weeks. And that just delays your data science team, right? Because any kind of feature exploration, you dare almost not try it out because it's going to be 3 weeks, right? So instead of just imagine what you would like to try out or what might work, you don't do that. Now we're down to kind of retraining in a few hours.
You do it over cloud? Or?
Yes,
Yeah.
the whole system runs on Amazon.
Okay, thanks.
And then it's really just a cost issue. But then again, yeah, we're on video, it doesn't matter, but every return for a retrain is probably more expensive today. Certainly half a year ago, last time I looked at it, I think it was about $1,600. So we have plus 30 data science and engineers helping out the data science team. It hurts when I see people around the office, ka-ching, 1,600, ka-ching, oh, whoa.
Do you use the same hardware for runtime as well?
No. So 2 different systems. So we have an offline training system which we set up, which we can do on even, so you know how you can buy different types of instances on Amazon, right? So you can buy spot instances for where, sure, we can train the model now or a little bit later. It's all good and fine, right? But in production, obviously, I need the reliability of everything running at all times. So we're trying to buy cheaper spot instances for the offline training, and production runs separate to that.
And that was an answer to what question?
I asked him whether the hardware was same for training and runtime usage.
Absolutely fascinating talk. I'm just mind blown. But My question is, how do you build trust? Like, why should I trust an agent? And not in, maybe it doesn't apply to your company or what you're doing, but
I'm not
someone like,
insulted.
okay, but someone like, your first example, like booking on Expedia, right? There's people that just need to get it done. They don't care what's the
Yep.
cost, they just need the time. There's people that want to save $200 or $300. They want to find the best deal they can. How do I know my agent or my employee is doing the best she can or he can?
I think there will be many processes which will simply just replicate from the existing employer-employee relationship, and I think that will carry over to these agents. So as far as we figured out how to run an organization, I think we should be able to manage the idea of having an army of agents. I do agree, though, that I need to have some trust in you doing exactly what I told you to do. I think, though, that will be built up over time, given that the initial agents will be somewhat simplistic, as in, it will not be, could you do my taxes come year end? And then it just submitted, and I'm like, yeah, I guess that's okay. And then the IRS comes to pick me up. And I think there'll be a set of steps before I get to something for where I need to validate. But I don't necessarily think that my interpretation of you need to do the job in full suggests that it needs to be submitted. It could just be that, could you do my taxes? Given that really, some in here, I'm sure, have no more than 5 documents which they use as a backdrop to do their taxes. So you just say, hey, I've attached the 5 documents, my W-2 and so on and so forth. Can you just do the form for me? Then you might read the form before you submit it. I still think that is the job done in full. That's pretty much how you would use HRBlock or somebody else. And I can see that work out, but I actually keep kind of falling back to the whole employee and employer relationship that we have today. But you're right, and just come back to, so we actually do see this already, that we initially didn't expose what Amy was talking to your guest about. We could see that even for something as simple as, let's say you just used Amy on all the meetings where you meet down, as in there's some sort of social hierarchy, whether we like it or not, right? So use it for all the meetings where you meet down. But even there, we could see that people needed to be exposed a little bit to, so how does this agent actually speak to my friends, colleagues, partners, customers? And now we have this kind of onboarding process where we expose it. I BCC you for the first 3 meetings. You can ask her, hey, what did you talk to Tommy about? And she emails you the whole dialogue and so on and so forth. So it's a very good question, and I thought people just wouldn't care, but they do care.
All right. So my question goes to the point that you made that you paid a lot of attention to the personality of Amy or the machine itself, right?
Yep.
Could you highlight some of the aspects of that personality and how it is important? So is it like the way it is interacting with different people or learning from the interactions that are made in the past, or what exactly do you mean by the personality?
So if you hire somebody to sit and manage your calendar, you'll certainly do a couple of things. Obviously give them the lay of the land of, this is how I want you to manage my calendar. I like to do it at this address, these coffee shops, this link, these are my call-in numbers, and so on and so forth, right? And that's not what I'm talking about. That is really just to make sure that she's a good employee. What I'm talking about is, so how does she communicate with these people? As in, if you say, this is urgent, Amy, set something up between Stephanie and I today. That applies a level of urgency for where Amy will certainly reach out to Stephanie, then Stephanie doesn't come back to her. Then she is put in this interesting situation where I told her to do a job, which is slightly rude, where you now need to reach out to Stephanie again. It's only been 45 minutes, but you still have to reach out. What is her tone? She needs to understand that that is a little bit aggressive, but I still work for Dennis. So we try to build that type of understanding into her personality. Or let's say that you and me are meeting up. It's already on the calendar. Next Wednesday, 10 o'clock. Then I email you saying, hey, can we push it to 2 o'clock? We can. Then I email you later. Can we push it to another day And then Amy gets to work on it. Then I email you again, can we push it to first week of October? And at some point along the way, I turn from being a nice guy to an asshole, and we're gonna figure out where that happens. But Amy still works for me. So she's gonna do what I tell her to do, but she needs to understand that this is not fortunate, just not cool. So we've tried to inject some sort of level of empathy into the equation for where, you know what, I'm so sorry that we have to kind of reschedule this once again. Those aren't the words. Anna and Diane and the others will do better, but some idea of she actually understands that this is the third time, and it's implied that I work for Dennis, but it's my job, so can we do that first week of October? And here's the really kind of interesting thing, not even kind of funny, which is that we've seen that even as we expose the fact that this is a machine, if we do the robotic loop for where we don't recognize the fact that this is getting a little bit unfortunate, versus the one for where we inject some empathy, where it's obviously machine empathy, we increase the probability of keeping the meeting intact. As in, you know this is a machine that somehow suggests this is unfortunate, and that increases the likelihood of you keeping the meeting in October. And that's what I'm talking about in this idea of how do you craft, you know, this persona. And again, we spent hours on end on whether this will warrant an exclamation point. As in, that could be a week-long project where, is this the one for where we need to pull out the big guns? Exclamation point. And again, sounds overly anal, but I think it's a worthwhile endeavor. Just as everybody who will do an app will really, hopefully, spend time and energy in trying to figure out what is the best way to navigate inside this application, what is the best way to convey this information, craft the design, and so on and so forth. Does that make sense?
Yes, I think it does.
And you can think about it, if you only think, I'll tell you about how we then put it together. So we have really, we think of it as scenarios that can happen. So this is not a decision tree for where, because there'll be no end to that tree, right? There's simply too many things you can talk about. So we can build out these scenarios on the fly, and templates feed into these scenarios, as in, I need to both talk about me not knowing the location, the fact that it's the third time, and also haven't been able to fetch Tommy, and whatever it might be. And we have these templates. They design those templates. Those templates then feed off a set of variables for where, what was the name of Tommy's assistant? Because I need to kind of have her name ready and available here, because that's the best way to kind of communicate this. And that is really what they sit and design the scenarios, the templates, and the variables, so that they can, you know, see Amy have a real conversation. And then they go through the dialogue model. Just, so how did she talk? You know, just go through this over and over again. So, there was 23 emails over 2 months. Something that just got postponed, and many people, you've been on those threads yourself. And so how did that actually play out? And then try to kind of look at that. Was that the route we would have taken had we been able to kind of dictate it? Or somehow did something happen here where she took a detour? And do we need to kind of design around that? As in, that's not the response I wanted. And you know this, I can almost guide you towards some setting in the way I speak, and we end up in the place I would like. And that's part of their work.
So it seems like there's, how do you deal with identifying and resolving ambiguity or error on the human part? And are you more trying to condition your users to behave in a certain way with the interface, or vice versa?
I do not want, at least for us, to create an agent for where there's some implied syntax. I want us to, at success, completely democratize the idea of a personal assistant that can manage your calendar. So my mom cannot somehow be suggested that there's a way you should speak to Amy. Just by suggesting that, she's out. As in, I stop listening. So I certainly do not want that. So we're taking on the challenge of having to try to disambiguate anything that comes in. We are fortunate enough that we deal with 3 entities, right? And we can heavily invest in those 3 entities. But I also think we are allowed, by the way, to have scenarios where I go back and ask for clarification, like any good assistant would do. So I think we are in a better setting than Siri, and again, not because we're smarter, it's just that if she does not understand, her surrender setting is a complete disconnect, as in 10 web results, as in, you might as well give me nothing, that's actually better. Here, if I ask you, did you, just like if I say next week, Sunday night, 8 o'clock, I mean in 4 hours from now. Many Americans will mean in 7 days from now. And if somehow this is one of those settings where we are not confident, I could just ask you. Obviously, if I ask you on every second email, the agent is not a good employee, and you will say, hey, bugger off, I'll do this myself. So we're just gonna figure out, where does that, how far does that pendulum swing towards the point where I'm allowed to ask you something. So I feel comfortable in having that opening at least. But I don't want it to be syntax. That's too aggressive, and that's not what you said. But I don't want it to lean towards something where I suggest that it would be better if you wrote 1,700 hours for 5 o'clock, because then I can pick it up.
Hey, Dennis.
Hey.
This one over here.
Oh.
Really appreciate the talk. I guess the thought I had is you talk about Siri and kind of the importance of the level of personality or empathy, but have oftentimes seen that when people engage with Siri, oftentimes Siri might say something like, oh, I'm so sorry, I don't understand you. Well, you'll hear people yell into their phone, they'll be like, you're not sorry, you're a machine. Have you done any research around whether or not the level of personality can come off as disingenuous and then actually turn off the end user, understanding that's a bot, not a real person?
So I think anybody who does any type of agent will have to decide upfront whether they want to humanize it or not. As in, that's a black and white type decision. It can't be in the middle. That would probably be the worst you can do. So you need to figure out whether you want to be Google Now or Siri or Amy. So go pick. I believe there's a ton of value in humanizing the agent. I do agree there's a certain set of dangers in that avenue, but I think the dangers do not outweigh the benefit I get. The setting which you describe is one for where, which is not necessarily what you're suggesting, but some could suggest that this is a case of, can I fool you into believing that this is a human? Which I don't think is the game we're playing. I think, have any one of you seen Ex Machina, the movie? If you haven't seen it, see it tonight. It's awesome. But at the very beginning of the movie, right, Caleb comes in, and the whole movie is really just one long Turing test, and he's immediately seen that this is some sort of robotic setting, and he says, essentially, end the test. I know already now. And he then says, but that is not the test. The test is that I tell you up front that this is a machine, and you like the machine so well that you treat it like a human. I think we're in the exact same setting where I don't want to fool you. I want to tell you that this is a machine, but now I want to do a job so good that you say, you know what? I'm going to thank her anyway. And that happens, by the way. And here's this statistic for you. So in 11% of all the meetings which we do, we will see at least one email where the only intent is gratitude. As in, they want nothing else but give Amy a virtual pat on the back. 11%. That is dramatic. That doesn't mean that I haven't seen what you suggested. And that happened very early on for where we weren't aggressive enough in exposing the fact that this is machine driven, which somehow created some sort of disconnect where some people, but I spoke to her for 4 days and I would just have wanted to know there was a machine. I'm not sure why, as in that I couldn't kind of create a connect with, but after we kind of agreed on the fact that it's not a game of whether I can fool you, it's a game of whether I can do it so well that you want to continue to treat it as a human. And that's certainly our strategy. Here's a inside comment for you, but if you do the humanized agent, you get better data. more elaborate data on what you should be able to do with the response that just arrived. That alone could be reason enough for you to choose that avenue over the other one.
So how do you deal with kind of these tougher to resolve results? So I guess like a simple example would be like, you go try to book yourself a flight and you're like, wow, all these flights are terrible, but I need to get to this place, I need to go, so I'm accepting this terrible flight. But when you have kind of when you're not the one kind of negotiating and you come up with a result that seems bad, like how does Amy communicate that back in an effective way so you know, like, no, this was not a bad result, this was the best result?
Good question. So I'll give you 2 examples of how we've attacked that type of scenario. One is that we've implemented some level of elasticity on your preferences. As in, nobody will have a set of preferences that are completely black and white. As in, I'll raise capital from SoftBank. Hell, I'll do the meeting at 3 a.m. if they call me, and that'll be that. But I'll certainly have some level of elasticity in my preferences for where the good assistant should not seek approval. As in, you say, I do meetings between 9 and 6 every day, leave at 3 on Fridays, and so on and so forth. If somehow the only time we could meet was at 6:30, she should be allowed, once every blue moon, to do just that, and you knowing that there must have been something where it was completely impossible to do anything else but this, so hey, here we are. So that's certainly my first response. Allow for some elasticity of preferences. Number 2, which comes in kind of 2 flavors. One, assume that you're allowed to do things and disconnect to preferences if it's obvious. As in, set up a call with Julianne from Singapore. So that's 12 hours. So somehow you already agree to the fact that this is going to provide some discomfort in your life. So just by you asking me to do the job, here we are. But then there's the settings where you and me both live in Manhattan, we need to meet up, and somehow the only time we can do is 9 p.m. Outside of all of my preferences, I can't really justify any elasticity to that extent. She should just go back and say, the only time I can find for you 2 to meet is 9 p.m. Thursday. Are you okay with that? And we actually go back and just ask the host, and he'll then say, cancel the meeting, or you know what, turn it into a call, or whatever he might say, and then that new conversation that might just be started because of that. You're it now.
I was just curious to ask, you mentioned you opened the talk with the shift in how software is going to be built, and I was just curious, a lot of times that's associated with some change in either the conditions or the underlying enabling technology. I don't know if you talked about it already and I missed it, but what's the shift that you would say is driving this forward?
I think there's a few factors, and sometimes it's hard to kind of define the factors that made the shift while it's happening, but in hindsight it becomes obvious what this moment in time really was, and whether it was 2 years ago or today or 2 years from now. But I certainly believe that the amount of data which we are able to collect and store at almost no cost, the compute which is made available to us at, again, almost no cost, and with the amount of data, some of the models that didn't work in the past now have started to work. So the whole idea of neural nets and so on and so forth that we thought perhaps wouldn't do well, do extremely well. And then lastly, the intimacy of the mobile device for where you're close to your agent. As in, the agent is not somebody which you visit, it's somebody which comes along with you. I certainly think those are interesting variables that I've seen us move us towards this. And then there's some sort of inflection point, right, for where it becomes a new paradigm. It's not that we ever really agreed that apps is the new paradigm, but at some point we still agreed, right? So it happened at some moment, probably through the amount of mobile phones, how robust the platform was, and so on and so forth. But those are the four I certainly look at.
Dennis, yeah.
Oh, sorry.
Sorry.
I look confused.
You need an agent. Great, fascinating topic. I'm just curious. I love the way you segmented the market into vertical and horizontal. How do you see this business model evolving? I mean, how do you tend to monetize? Is it per transaction? Is it a one-time fee? And how do you see it evolving over time?
So we can deploy all the traditional business models to the agent world as well. Somehow I'm most fond of the traditional SaaS subscription model because it mimics, again, the employer-employee relationship where I have a job I want it done and I've employed you to do it and I don't really want to negotiate the price whenever we chat, just again, do what I told you to do. So I like that idea and that's certainly how we'll go to market for where you'll hire this assistant, again, at a very low SaaS price, not $50,000 a year, but $20, $30, right? So it's a complete disconnect to the idea of having 19 employees to manage your personal life, but you could still have a pool of agents do the same. So that.
What would happen if that great one that you made, which is, sorry, but when you do something like that, what would happen if there are intelligent agents talking to intelligent agents, then it's kind of, you can, I guess, calculate or measure the transactions, but somebody's not going to pay, oh my God, it just went out of my budget at this point.
Exactly, which is why most business models that provide some unlimited function sees the best utility. So whenever there's some sort of cost per transaction, people change behavior. Or you simply disallow for things to happen, right? As in, there's a setting on your iPhone where you need to allow it to download your email just in case you're on a shitty plan with Sprint that somehow will have you pay, $800 next month. That shouldn't really be a feature. As in, if that's what you want for your email account, you should just choose that. But the business model destroyed that. And I certainly don't like that idea because what I think is going to get really sexy that we haven't talked about, which will move us towards this kind of Oracle setting, is when the verticalized agents start to talk to each other. So you've asked Amy, set up a meeting with my 2 partners in Miami this Thursday. And she'll negotiate it, it'll be on the calendar. Somehow, given the fact that we play this out in the future, you would have asked your travel agent to book a ticket to Miami and a return ticket, but somehow the meeting is now getting delayed. As it's getting delayed, which you're perhaps not even aware of, who should your scheduling agent say, Amy, reach out to? You, perhaps, or if you rely on your agents, just reach out to your travel agent and say, hey, you know what, this is going to run late, so can you rebook the ticket? The travel agent can see that, yeah, but I can't get home tonight, so we're going to reach out to your hotel booking agent and book a hotel, then we're going to do the flight tomorrow. All of these agents are going to forward the receipts to your accounting agents so you can keep all your receipts. And that is going to be interesting. Once they're allowed to talk to each other on, as you allow them to do so, that I think is where the business model can hinder that. If somehow that could propel out of cost control, and we wouldn't want that. So I'm hoping that everybody will have the employer-employee type idea of putting these on staff, and you just ask them to work for you, and that'll be that. And this setting here is actually really interesting if you really think about it, if any one of you are engineers, right? So right now, if any 2 software applications want to speak to each other, we would, if I want to speak to Expedia, right, I would go figure out what APIs do they provide, and it's on me to kind of figure out how to extract information through those APIs from Expedia, and all the burden is on me. Why is that? Shouldn't it be the other way around? But it's kind of it's flipped. But I think in the future, as we move towards the agent model, the burden will be flipped. As in, I will just email Expedia, assume that it's their responsibility to figure out what I just asked them. Hey, what is the cost for 2 tickets to Miami for the weekend? And it's for them to figure out how to interpret that. And that puts the burden now on the receiver. And that is interesting. That means there will be a whole host of connections between software applications that are about to happen because there's no cost to you. Anybody who's done any type of application now knows the burden of even just managing 3 integrations, right? Because you almost need to hire a full-time engineer just to manage the 3 integrations, because when you finish the last one, the first one will break and round in circles you go.
Thank you very much, Dennis.
Cool. Thank you.
For those of you who were unable to get your question in during the session, please feel free to stay afterwards if Dennis will stick around a few minutes. He said he'll be here all night, so. I wanted to also draw your attention to the fact that we have a survey that we'd like you to complete, and if you'd like a copy of the slides, you'll get that as a bonus. And the survey link is shown on the screen. It's bit.ly/August 2016 survey, all lowercase. We are going to have be giving away a door prize that Dennis is going to help me out with in a minute here. But first, parking validation will be. Don't forget that you can get your parking validated from the front desk. And don't forget that our sponsor, Product Academy, productacademy.org, you can explore an 8-week program for becoming a growth product manager or a 2-day program for becoming a craftsman PM. So without further ado on the door prize, what we're going to do is we're going to find out who had the best question for Dennis. And so, do we have any nominations?
The question about the hardware, I thought that was a great question because it's something that you don't really think of, or rather you don't really put that much effort into it. So I don't know your name, sorry.
Thank you. Any other nominations?
The question that was about the personality of you, because that led to the whole discussion of the nuances of intention and accuracy of the communication going on between the human and the other, human on one side and an agent on the other. So,
And your name was?
Gagan?
Thank you. So let's have a show of, well, actually, let's let Dennis decide which of those two. Okay, let's not let Dennis decide. I shouldn't put him on the spot. So let's have a show of hands for the first question.
What was that question?
The question is related to hardware. Was the training
Offline training versus production environment, yeah.
Offline training versus
Production environment.
production environment, okay? And the other question, I guess we'll review that one again.
about the personality of the machine itself, how it interacts?
All right, show of hands for the first question. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 6. Okay, we had 6 for that one. Show of hands for the second question. All right, I think we have the winner. All right, that should wrap it up. Thanks.
This is great. You didn't have, you didn't have a very good arm. Remove him.
2017.
How late is she opens up a channel, she goes to IC, sign up for it. Our division is automation. Every day.
Why do you like the still waiting? I mean, I made the wait list.
I'm not being built, but I can tell you, so this software guys really I think this is going to be just like one of his stories was that he had a team from his very senior guy. That's what I'm saying. It's just even just connecting everybody together. I'm using these agents. If you don't like a lot of low works so I think it's going to be a similar story like that, and I think hopefully it has a sort of memory level. I think we've been through this once before. I might be optimistic, but I'm never Do you know what really keeps me up? That's a very interesting observation. So here's the point. There's a bunch of people who also do, but most of them just hire 40 people in the Philippines, slice and dice it, and by human, there's just too many errors being applied. Trying to implement the process. The funny thing is that it seems fair. The shittier agents the most intelligent when we see a poor agent come back, let's do the 30-second law. What do I do now? Do I just surrender as in I explode? Or I need now to take the burden of that is not a true date, and I have to resolve the idea of that's not a true date, and they say, how about August 3rd? That happens already. So we can see from a lot of kind of semi-outsourced settings, all the burden. And I haven't here's the funny thing again, you having a shitty car, you bear very little burden, all of them bear bigger burden, as I say, it's really shitty. Yeah, even the environment, if you actually killing somebody who's certainly higher than you and kill you around you. So you increase the probability of killing that one from 2 in 100,000 to 5 in 100,000. Not you. I find that interesting. I don't have an answer other than I just buy myself to sleep. Yeah.
And like, people would like, first doing a test or whatever, getting blown to pieces. It's so hard. Maybe like weeping. And then like, feel sorry for the robot, whatever they say, like, if he gets a raise.
But it's not. So there's two stories to that. There's an article in the Atlantic where they actually, yeah,
That's where I read it.
yeah, exactly. So they would actually pick the pieces up and ask to have it reassembled. The new one. This one reassembled and sent back to me. Yeah. This would save my life. Not the new one. But here's the funny thing. You haven't seen that video from Boston Dynamics. Have you seen that? Boston.
The one where you say,
Yeah.
you see the YouTube comments and they're like,
No, but even you, forget about even the comments. Just for a second, I was thinking, what an asshole. I don't like him. He said, he's being really mean. He brought a hockey stick and everything, and he gets up and then he puts it down again. Hey, don't do that. And it's somehow just interesting. It takes no more than a couple of minutes, and then you have some emotion for that machine. Yeah. Sounds crazy to say, but I think there will. So I think it's a good question, but I think conceptually we should not drive standards. I think we can drive best practices, but I think the standard is a natural language. All the way to ability is to not have a standard. I said, I should be able to ask any company a question in plain English. The burden is on them. So we already agree. I said, you didn't even ask me right now. So Dennis, you're obviously from abroad, so let me make this simple for you. I was just there 5 weeks ago. So go 3 times a year. In Barbados. Yeah. So I think then again, you put the burden on me. I say, you assume I'm able to understand the question you just asked me.
I just like talking to what about it?
So I think the agent should not care whether the other agent is human or machine. There should be some sort of protocol. My first request is machine or human. If human, then I do this. Machine, then we can do this. But I think the machine communication will like.
So, does this customer sentiment to be applied? So, if the person saying, next Friday, I don't think this Friday is but I have a friend who always thinks next Friday means this coming, essentially what they're like.
So, right now, we don't
Because you tend to focus on quality of what's your card there? That's great to pass out.
So when Jim says next Friday, he doesn't mean.
Let's meet over there here.
You don't beyond that. Yeah.
Let's get coffee. Suggest this.
Try to get the shot. Do what?
Program.
Oh no, like using it.
Your future will be one where you just say, hey Siri.
But outside of work, schedule.
You can pretend. Hey, Rob, it's going on.
entity detection. Yes. It might be a package.
Well, you know, that's eventually. But to be true.
Just like everybody will tell us. Yeah, like these different so that's sort of fancy. It's like all ideas are
right. Yeah.
Then it's
right. Unless it's like a unless it's like a
trade on
set schedule. Or even then, yeah. So I'll look over that. But then inside of it, you're swimming 80 events. Something like that. We have what do you do? Be showing hard. It is hard.
So if like maybe don't want to like 5 minutes, great. Like 10 minutes that'll be fine. Like 8:45.
Okay. I will. It seems they're not going to start breaking down chairs. Okay. Let me just. Yeah. Just like. But the fact is,
so the very first thing you do on getting access to what maybe is that you'll send an email and say, hey, maybe I'm still this and that. Please go calendar so that see
just so much more. And the thing is, you can't really
and now it's exactly the same as if you had some person who's sitting in the front office. You do have Jesse. You wouldn't ask Jesse, Jesse, show me your features. Punch in the faces. So this one is just saying, whenever I need Jesse to do something, you either shout across the room or you email Jesse. That's very smart. So this once you heard this, there's nothing to install.
You know, unfortunately, it's the other thing about product management. Because there's, if you look at the job board, they're all like, oh, it is? 100 people. How do you do that?
Just like you see Jesse. You see Jesse. He can see what I'm talking about, right? He's there. He's now in his thread. So you have to really either accept that or not accept that. We're very afraid of the question we ask is, people are so afraid that they did not dare.
I came up from, I got into from
it became sort of a chore to hand over to a system of this trust. But then I don't think we've done a good job. This trust, when you agree, you shouldn't hire. But we see
what happens
nobody
is really responsibilities for the role distributed that get done. Yeah. But you know, it is important to have one contact.
This is not a big part of this.
That's probably only. Or just had their asked product manager before.
Nice meeting you. Nice talking to you. I did a couple of your stuff because
Yeah, it was smart.
Amy is exactly the same. We actually tried not to recreate a new type of system. We're trying to recreate or mimic something which people want. It's just too expensive. So not pay $50K for it, but pay $30. So in the kind of idea you have of Jesse, whatever your favorite name for somebody.
You don't have to go home, but you can't stay here.
Just a quick question.
What's the time limit right now?
He's just like, gotta start.
So there's two stacks really. There's the drill. We want to continue on that analogy, which is this front end console, which is all JavaScript, really. Yes, and on the data science side, it's all Scala. So we use Mongo to store our data. We can change our model, and we knew we would have to like 800 times over in the beginning, so we needed something flexible to have support that. And picked Scala because it's strict, it's compiled. It was unique enough for us to be able to assemble a team where we could become a big Scala shop. So how do I lure somebody to not work for Google but work for us instead? And Scala was actually, I wish I could say it was a huge part of our strategy. I think we stumbled into it a little bit, but now it really works well for us. Yeah, because now, so many Scala shops were short of 40 guys working Scala. It's not too many. And that's really it. So we don't even, so we force actually out, you know this, certainly that. So you're going to have some data scientists sit and work on R and come out with some insight. We found 2 new features that are super strong predictors. And then you have your backend guys working in whatever. Yeah, but it's like that delta here is just so dramatic that there's months in between this and this. So we force our data scientists to write any test, any hypothesis in Scala. That could be wrong, but that bridges the gap dramatically. So you can go from a new feature being explored and found in weeks. Yes, it goes through a kind of, so no data science code goes straight into production. It goes through a review process, sits with the back engineer, but conceptually, rewrite. Yes, exactly. Yes.
So, is there a bigger presence? Like you said, your goal is to human. That's good.
Yep.
So, if you take the Eastern Project, right? I mean, when Roomba came up, they were trying to humanize it. But people, it was easy, right? They didn't expect what would happen. With yours, it's just a solid, right? Like, there's no physical link. So, I can feel, it's much more harder for me, harder for me to imagine it as a human being. So, is there a bigger burden on you because you're purely software?
I actually think it's the opposite. I could be wrong here. So